Every night at exactly midnight, a train would pass through the sleepy little town of Blackwood. The train was unlike any other. It was an old, steam-powered locomotive with carriages that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The people of Blackwood rarely spoke of the midnight train, and those who did would whisper of strange occurrences and eerie happenings. One night, a young man named Thomas, new to the town, decided to investigate the midnight train. He had heard the stories but was skeptical of the town's superstitions. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and his curiosity, Thomas made his way to the old, deserted train station on the outskirts of town. As he waited in the darkness, the silence was broken by the distant sound of a train whistle. A chill ran down his spine, but he stood his ground. The train's headlights appeared on the horizon, casting an eerie glow on the tracks as it approached. The train came to a slow, creaking stop at the platform, and the doors of one carriage slid open. To his surprise, the carriage was empty. The interior was beautifully decorated, with plush velvet seats and ornate chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. It looked like something from a bygone era. Without thinking, Thomas stepped inside, his curiosity overpowering his caution. The doors closed behind him, and the train began to move. Thomas sat down on one of the velvet seats, looking around in awe. There was a strange, otherworldly feel to the train, as if it was suspended in time. He glanced out the window, but instead of the familiar townscape, he saw a vast, starry sky stretching out into infinity. As the train chugged along, Thomas noticed something peculiar. Figures began to appear in the carriage, as if materializing out of thin air. They were passengers, dressed in clothing from different eras, and each seemed lost in their own world. Some were reading newspapers from decades ago, others were staring out the window, and a few were engaged in quiet conversation. Thomas tried to speak to them, but no one acknowledged his presence. It was as if he was invisible to them, or perhaps they were mere echoes of the past. The train continued its journey through the night, passing through landscapes that seemed to shift and change with every mile. After what felt like hours, the train slowed to a stop at a station that Thomas did not recognize. The sign above the platform read, "Eternity." The passengers began to disembark, one by one, disappearing into the fog that enveloped the station. Feeling uneasy, Thomas decided it was time to leave. He stepped off the train and onto the platform, but as he did, the train doors closed behind him, and the locomotive vanished into the mist. Thomas looked around, realizing that the station was completely deserted. The only sound was the distant hoot of an owl. Panicking, he started walking, hoping to find his way back to Blackwood. But as he wandered through the fog, he soon realized that the landscape was unrecognizable. The town was nowhere to be seen, and the night seemed to stretch on endlessly. Just as despair began to set in, Thomas heard the faint sound of a train whistle in the distance. Running towards the sound, he saw the midnight train reappear on the tracks, slowly making its way back to the platform. Without hesitation, he jumped back on board. The train took him on another journey through the night, but this time, when it stopped, Thomas found himself back at the old Blackwood station. Relieved, he stepped off the train, and as he did, the locomotive slowly pulled away, disappearing into the darkness. Thomas never spoke of his experience, but he was never the same after that night. He knew that the midnight train was not just a legend, but a gateway to another realm, a place where time and reality were but fleeting illusions. And so, the midnight train continued its nightly journey through Blackwood, carrying with it the secrets of those who dared to board.